So today we're going to think about what we can do with a perfect square. And I'm using for inspiration with this project or this lesson, the book, The Perfect Square. And it was written and illustrated by Michael Hall, and he does a wonderful job with his books, and he uses shapes in a lot of his books just as the main focus. And the perfect square is also something that makes something positive out of maybe something negative that happens to the poor square. And we're kind of in that boat as well, and where we're just doing the best that we can with what we have, which is also what I'm going to be showing you. You can be doing all of these things at home with what you have. So let's read the perfect square first, and then we can move on to what we can do with the perfect square. So The Perfect Square by Michael Hall. It was a perfect square. It had 4 matching corners. It had 4 equal sides. And it was perfectly happy. But on Monday, the square was cut into pieces and poked full of holes. It wasn't perfectly square anymore. So it made itself into a fountain that babbled and giggled and clapped. On Tuesday, the square was torn into scraps. So it made itself into a garden. On Wednesday, the square was shredded into strips. So it made itself into a park. On Thursday, the square was shattered. So it made itself into a bridge. On Friday, the square was snipped into ribbons. So it made itself into a river. On Saturday, the square was crumpled and ripped and wrinkled. So it made itself into a mountain. On Sunday, the square waited to see what was next. It waited and waited. Nothing happened. Its 4 equal sides were confining. Its 4 matching corners were rigid and cramped. Confining means that you feel like you're sitting in a box and you can't get out. So it made itself into a window that looked out on a mountain that gave birth to a river that was crossed by a bridge that led to a park that was home to a garden that had at its center a fountain that babbled and giggled and clapped. So that's The Perfect Square by Michael Hall. He also did Heart-Shaped Animals, which is a really nice book for how to make animals out of hearts, and he has a couple other ones, but I particularly like The Perfect Square as well. So what we're going to do today is we're going to be thinking about squares, obviously, and we can make our squares. Obviously, we're not going to be able to find our squares anyplace, so we have to make our squares. And our perfect squares we have to make with our rulers, otherwise they won't be perfect. And the idea here is that you make something out of all the pieces of that square. So if you cut your square up, you can't leave a piece away. You have to use all of those pieces to make the next thing that you're making out of the square. You can use any kind of paper that you like. I've got a lot of different types of paper that I'm going to think about today. I've got a book page that I ripped out. I use a lot of that in my own art. I save old books, and even you can use, instead of a book page, you could use something that came in the mail today that maybe your parents were going to throw away. All you're worrying about right now is that you have a square and that you have color in it. I'm also going to show you something that I'm going to make some colored paper out of just a piece of scrap paper that I used in my own art that I was going to throw away as well. I've got a piece of old scrapbook paper. We've got a piece of just plain old construction paper that has already cut out into a square. And I found some old wrapping paper too that you could use, or if you have old wrapping paper at home, you can use that for the color as well. And I've got a bag that got ripped up, and I can use that brown, just that brown craft paper too. So to start out, I'm thinking I'm going to do, I should actually back up and tell you that I have a recipe for my little recipe sheet for all of the things that you can do that I've come up with that you can do with the square, cutting a square and turning it into something else. The whole concept here is kind of like a tangram, if you're remembering what a tangram is. It's all of the different shapes, and you build something using those shapes blocked together. So you're kind of doing the same thing. Only we're cutting our shapes out of our square and using each and every one. So to start out with, I think I'm going to do some water because it's also going to show you how you can make some paper. And I'll do a boat, I think, with that. Oh, and you know what? I think I'll do just a really easy one for some of you too that are maybe thinking you want to start with something easy. Let's do a flower, bouquet of flowers. So I've got my book paper here, and it's just got some nice color in it. And I'm thinking I'm going to do 4 inches by 4 inches. So I've got my little ruler here, and I'm going to mark. And I know this is square already, so all I have to do is go 4 inches here. And I'm going to take this down and do 4 inches here. And now I want to take my ruler and I can go 4 inches like this. And then let's just do 4 inches like this. So I'm going to square it all off. I'm just going to draw each line like this and like this. And this is already square, right? So that works really beautifully for me. Put up my paper. And I've got my 4 inch by 4 inch square. Now I'm going to glue it on my white. And you recall for flowers, what happened was that square got torn into bits. Now you can make them really small, or you can, I'm going to do mine kind of medium size. So I've got maybe, I've probably got, at the end of this, I'm going to probably end up with 15, maybe a little more. And I'm not worrying about, since I'm using book paper, you see how it leaves that white edge sometimes because of the printing. That works fine as well. It kind of gives it a little more interest. And then all you have to do is scatter it across your paper. We want to glue them down, of course. I discovered that I don't have any glue stick at the house, and I'm not going out to buy glue stick, so I only have a little bit. I'm saving it. So I'm going to use some Elmer's glue and liquid glue. And I want to remind you about how to take the cap off liquid glue, because sometimes that gets a little tricky for us. You do not want to take this, twist this off. This takes everything off and you're going to end up with glue everywhere. Just the pointy end is the only one you want to twist off, and then you can, all you need is a little dot. And I kind of like them sitting up a little bit because it makes it look like they're more three-dimensional and they're coming off of our paper that way. And they look like they're real blooms, or close enough. And you can tell I'm not getting too terribly scientific with this. Let's go move ahead and pretend I've done each and every one. And now I need to do my stems. And actually I want to do one more over here. I'm going to do my stems. So stems, you can use just your pencil if you want to just use your pencil. And I'm going to do that. Or you can use marker or crayon, or maybe you want to do oil pastels. But you need to do your stems. And some of these can oh, I didn't glue those down, go right over the top. And you've got your flower garden. Isn't that beautiful? And I'm not worried about what's in the background. It's just all about color. I don't care if they're upside down or what have you. So that's your flower garden or your flower bouquet. The next thing I want to do is my water. So I want water going all the way across. So I want my square to be pretty big, right? If I have a little square like this, I'm not going to have much water. And so I am going to go ahead and this time I'm going to do 6 inches by 6 inches. And I'm going to take and just square it up again to my edge. And I've got 6 inches is the length of my ruler, so I'm okay. And I'm going to start here. And I know that actually, that isn't very good. So 6 inches, and I'm going to do 6 inches over here. And now I can kind of line that up. I didn't do a very good job, but oh, there we go. 6 inches by 6 inches. And once again, I'm going to do another 6 and 6. And I need to draw that line. There we go. And cut that out. Again, I'm not worrying about what's on my paper. All that does is kind of add a little bit of interest to it. Now, the reason why I'm doing water first is because I want to show you about using our supplies. I am thinking a little bit actually about those lines because you can see they're going across, and water, we want it to kind of go across this way. It'll look funny if our lines are going that way, or even that way might not be too bad, but I think water tends to go across the horizon from left to right. So that's the way we want to do most of our work since we know it's water. And I'm just using some markers here. I've got dark blue and I've got a little light blue in here. If you want to use color crayon or whatever, this is just a good way of adding your color. Whatever you have on hand again, but markers are perfectly acceptable. If you have blue paper, you can use blue paper. And I like 3 colors in everything I do. And a light, medium, and a dark is always a good recipe for good colors. And I'm going to add some yellow here. And you're probably thinking, oh, she's using yellow because yellow and blue make green. And you would be right in that. Plus, when there's a shine on the water, it's coming from the sun, which is yellow. That's a good reason a couple of really good reasons to use yellow. Now this would work okay for my water, but I want to remind you what you can do with watercolor markers. They're water soluble, which means that they melt in water, or the water removes it if you're going to wash or whatever. So I'm going to take my brush and just run some water over the top. And we have some really nice, more like paint, tie-dye colors. And that's a really easy way to kind of make paint. Normally I would let this dry, but since we're working and we don't want you to get bored, I'm going to go ahead and cut it. So now I am taking, and all I'm doing is my water strips that show movement, and that movement is shown by the ridges that I'm cutting in my paper. I'm not worrying too much about, I'm not worrying at all actually about what's behind my color. and my not worrying too much about my strips being how wide they are. So I'm going to make one that's kind of wide here and one that's skinny. So you can do whatever you want. I'm going to do one more here. And that black Sharpie that I had on there, I'm not even going to worry about that. So now we want to take all of our strips, and yes, we have to use all of them, and kind of distribute them across our white paper, our master sheet, or blank. And it doesn't have to be white. Again, you can use whatever you want to use. And I've got my strips here. Look at that. That's pretty good. So I want to put a boat in my water. And I am going to do that using my brown bag here. So take a little bit of this off. And I think at this time I'm going to have it be 4 inches by 4 inches. So I'm going to start at the edge here so I know I have a nice square. And I've got 4 inches, 4-inch mark. And I'm going to draw that line that connects them all. And now I can do, I have this square edge here, so I'm going to line that up along that one edge. And now I want to do 4-inch by 4-inch. And some of you that are younger, you maybe have a parent or an older sibling, a brother or sister who can make your squares for you if this becomes kind of hard. Maybe there's something around the house that you can use to model for your square too, like trace around. That's another option for you if you're kind of confused about how to make that square with a ruler, because I know that can be kind of hard. So I've now got my square, and you remember that I have my little recipes here. I'll show you what they look like right here, and I will put that up as post that on my on this video so you guys can download it and look at it. So my boat, and maybe you want to remind yourself what a boat is. If you want to just take your pencil and run a line across here, you can do that. And as a guide, I'm just merely going to cut it because I can see that I want to go corner to corner here. And I'm going to make 2 more triangles just like that. Now this obviously isn't a boat yet. And you can see, and I'm going to line them up here because can you see here on my recipe, I've got 2 squares. Well, now this square right here, I need to cut in half again, starting from this corner. And this one, or this triangle, excuse me, I need to take and cut off this little corner here. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that, which leaves me my 4 pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, that I can now use to make my sail for my sailboat. There's the bottom of the boat, and I'm going to have it sitting in the water. And my leftover piece, because I have to use every piece of my square, is going to be my flag. And of course you're going to glue it all down, and then you can do whatever else you want in here. If you want to do a little sky in there, or maybe you want to make a fish, because there's also a fish in the recipe, you can do that as well. And I'm anxious to see what you end up doing with your squares. If you're younger, start with a window, and then you can move to a mountain, which is merely just taking your square and ripping it in half, crumpling it up, and then gluing it down so it looks like a mountain. Those are the 2 easy ones. Probably the fountain is the most challenging, but I bet you can do that too. And for the fountain, one last tool. You will use a hole punch if you have a hole punch around. And a hole punch, for those of you that have never used it, it has this little tongue here, and then it's got the little puncher, which is a circle, and you stick your paper between the tongue and the area where it when it goes through between those, the tongue and the, let's say, the bottom lip, because it kind of looks like a mouth, and squeeze. And this is actually a really good exercise for your hands. And my puncher has a little edge that doesn't punch very well, but I can now take these out. And actually, look at, they can be bubbles. If I were to put a fish in here, they could be bubbles. So I'm anxious to see what you do with your squares, and I look forward to hearing from you if you have any comments. And the next time we meet, we will be talking about tape and all the things that you can do with tape. I'll bet you never thought you could draw with tape, but that's what we're going to do the next time we meet. So take care, and I will see you next time.